Lillian, welcome back. How are you doing?
Hey, Train, I'm absolutely awesome, and it's fantastic to be back. It's been a little while, but nice to connect with you again.
Yes, it has been 40 years since we last spoke,
It feels like it, maybe.
doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. Especially for us because you're like 25 and I'm like 22. So where does the time go?
I wish, I wish.
Maybe in another life, right? But welcome back. I know for you, you deal with parenting and relationships. And I know the last time we spoke, these are some things that probably are even needed more these days than maybe they were needed before, because like online there's so many people that would say that he has kids, she has kids, I would never ever date them. You have to pay me big money to date a single mother or a single father. But you're helping people to find balance between the two, right?
Absolutely. Well, my husband, had been married before, so my eldest son, who was 38, I separated from his dad when he was a year old, and then I met my now husband when he was two and a half. And my husband is actually 5 years younger than me, so he was very young then. He was barely old enough to have been his father, if that makes sense, because I think I was 28 and he was with a nearly 3-year-old, and he was only 25, 23. He was only 23. So yeah, but it worked out beautifully. We've been together for 36 years this year. And yeah, madly in love and have an amazing, connected, beautiful relationship.
Congratulations. You don't hear that too often, that people are married for that long.
Yeah.
Like my grandmother and grandfather were married for that long before they ultimately separated, and my parents were together for a long time before they did as well. Like the way they both tell the stories, that they were together back when you would find your husband or wife at the farmer's market, right? Like you take the ferry, which costs you 5 cents.
Yeah.
You'd go to the farmer's market. She would drop her handkerchief, and you knew,
I
aha,
love it.
she's the
Maybe we
one
need,
for me.
maybe we may need to go back to dating in that way.
I
Yeah.
think we do, because this swipe left is swipe right. It doesn't seem to be working. Like I haven't been on dating apps probably in, oh my goodness, it's been so long, and I just don't know how people meet people these days outside of maybe, like I know school used to be a big thing. I know workplace, but it seems
Yeah.
that's kind of shifted because you don't
Mhm.
want to put yourself in a difficult situation, because you're still trying to navigate how to approach men and women respectfully when it comes to job, and there seems to be a lot of gray area at work, right?
I think it's challenging these days. We've had this discussion many times. So I've got two sons. My oldest son is in his late 30s, my younger son, early 30s. So my younger son is about to get engaged, has set his wedding. So they're in a beautiful, loving, connected relationship. My eldest son, who is amazing, he's a naturopath, herbalist, nutritionist. He's got his several businesses. He's financially doing well. He's good looking, he's rounded in so many ways, yet he's still single. And he says it's hard to find a woman that, like he's fussy, I guess. Well, not fussy, but he has standards. And it's hard to find women who, tick those boxes. And he still wants to have children. So, like, he's coming up to, 39 on his next birthday. And so he's going to need to meet a younger woman, who can still, by the time they decide they want to have kids, can still, be happy to have a family. So it's challenging. I think it's challenging. You hear it from both women and men, don't you? But I find that I had the conversation with another group the other day with a gentleman who was saying it's really tough for young men these days, or single men, to and women seem to be getting fussier, like they want all the boxes to be ticked, good looking, financially stable, good job, good body, I think we're getting fussier, aren't we, in regards to our expectations.
There's a joke, right? It's that the woman wants 6 inches, 6 feet, and six figures, right? But
That's true. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
yeah, it's like what do you do? Most people are not even 6 feet. The average man in America is
Yeah.
like 5'7".
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most people are under 6 feet, right? And the average height for like a female, I believe, was like 5'3" or 5'4".
Yeah.
So most people aren't 6 feet, but yet you have people that want to be. There's someone I know. It was her type is so odd. She'll say that he has to make sure he has big hands and he has to be 6 feet and he has to be all this. I was like, okay, but what's your definition of hands? Like on your first date, do you bring like a measuring tape and you say, okay, your hands have to be right? Because I'm here just thinking, just have a job that can sustain the lifestyle that you want. Just be feminine,
Mm.
be friendly, be
Yeah.
non-aggressive, right? But now
Why are
it's
we
like,
not looking for, we're not looking for values and we're not looking
mm,
for who the person is. So who cares if they're 5'8" or 6 foot? Who cares if, they've got all the sixes, like it's just, aren't we looking for somebody that we can have a connection with, that we can, you know, have similar values and have some similar interests and enjoy being with. Like, yes, physicality is important, like there needs to be a level of attraction, I get that, but I think we're getting too fussy maybe, or we're getting very superficial maybe in what we're looking for in a partner.
like, what do you say to those who are maybe they want to find love, but as you mentioned, they're very specific and they're very fussy,
Yeah.
and their preferences have become their prison because what they
Mm.
want keeps them from even
Mm.
finding someone that would be relatively good for them.
Mm. I mean, this is not an area of expertise for me, by the way. I'm a parenting strategist, but I have a huge interest in relationship as well. And we have a lot of discussions, like I have with my sons as well. But I think that I'm in two minds because I also believe that we can attract what we want. So, for example, if there's a particular partner you want, to write down everything you want in that person, and that I believe if we know what we want and focus on what we want and feel that person is there for us, that we can attract them. But I think also that list has to have a certain level of realism about it as well. Like, if put your three sixes in there and a whole bunch of other stuff, then I guess it is possible to find that person, but the person who's seeking those three sixes, for example, do they tick all the boxes, that the recipient would be looking for as well? So there's a certain level of, you know, um, I don't know, like I think we're all looking for that perfect person rather than the person who, aligns with us and with our values and so forth. And I think, my husband and I are very different in a lot of ways. I'm an extrovert, he's an introvert. I'm a lot more out there than he is. He's a lot more conservative, but we have the same core values. And I think core values are what really holds the relationship together. So what is really important, to us as humans and in that relationship. And of course, communication and connection and relationship. And they're all things that we have to work on, whether it be a romantic relationship or a parenting relationship. We've got to look at what does having a successful and positive and loving and connected relationship mean? What does that entail? So whether, you're the parent, establishing that relationship with your child, or whether you're an adolescent or young adult going out there and exploring relationships, or whether you're a fully grown adult looking to connect, either with a friendship or a romantic relationship. What are you looking for in that relationship? Is really, really important. But being so passionate about parenting, I think it really all starts with parenting, helping the child to have. So what I teach in the nurtured heart approach, and I know I'm getting a bit off track here, is to build what we call inner wealth, which means having the child have a sense of self, so that they know who they are, that they know that they are a kind person, a compassionate person, a person with integrity, a person with flexibility, a person with tenacity, etc. And they know who they are as a person. So when as the child grows up into adolescence and adulthood, they know who they are and they know what their values are. And therefore, I think more organically they're going to attract a like-minded person because they know who they are and what their own values are. So they're not mixed up about who am I as a person, what do I stand for. When you stand strong and know who you are as a person and what you stand for, and you're strong on that, then I think people are going to kind of see you for who you are, and the right people will be attracted to you, whether that be a romantic relationship or a business relationship or a friendship relationship. When you know who you are as a person and you stand strong on that, then I think you will attract like-minded people. Like the people I surround myself with are all like-minded. I just don't connect with people who don't align with my values. And if they come into my life for some reason, they just don't stick around because they don't align, if that makes sense. So I think it's important to know who we are as a person, and that really starts with how we're parented and what, our sense of self as we're growing up. I think it's all really connected.
So I look at the parenting aspect of it since you shared that, and I look at my life and some of the struggles that I went through as a child.
Yeah.
And I see there was a point where I saw glimpses of that struggle in my adulthood. And I'll
Yeah.
give you an example of that. In my childhood, I didn't necessarily have the best people around me, and I was influenced by those people because that's all I had.
Yeah.
So it's either sometimes when you're a young kid, right? It's either to have a bad influence and no influence at
Yeah.
all, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So as I grew up in my adulthood, especially my let's say in my teens, let's say 18, 19 and that age, I noticed the same thing. But this time what I did differently was I noticed it. Because as a child, you don't really notice it because
Yeah.
you're at the mercy of your caregivers.
Yeah.
But as an
Absolutely.
adult, I began to realize I was like, hey, this person doesn't align where I want to go. This
Exactly.
person is taking more from me than they are giving in. So when you
Correct.
mentioned how we're parented and the impact of it, how early do you believe that starts, and how much of an impact does it have on us as we grow into our adulthood trying to navigate in the world?
It starts from the day you come into this world, and actually even possibly earlier, like in utero, because those first very early developmental years, they say the first 2 years, and then they say the first 12 months, the first 6 months. I really believe it's important for a mother or a father, preferably a mother, to be with their child. They say at least 2 years, but I really believe at least 5 years, and at least until they start school, because that connection is really important. When a young baby is taken away from their parent and put into childcare, for example, and I know I'm not judging, sorry, I'm not meaning to be judging, because I know a lot of people have to go back to work to earn an income, but I think those early years are very, very important for the bonding and for that child to feel they're worthy of their parents' time and love and connection. Babies and infants don't understand why their parent, in their minds, have abandoned them at a young age. Why have they been taken, from the home into a strange place where there are other babies and other kids, and they those kids could then grow up with the sense of, well, I wasn't loved enough for my parents to stay with me or to be with me, and that might not be the instance in all cases. And I'm certainly, once again, no expert in this. But when I reflect back, and, I've been talking to my beautiful potential daughter-in-law, well, I still call her my daughter-in-law, about this and how important, because she's a real career woman. And I'm trying to, without, saying, being an interfering mother-in-law, but how important it is for that baby to have you in her or his life, like ongoing. And I want to be, as a potential grandmother, and I'm hoping to be a grandmother, I want to be a part of that, upbringing of that child as well, because I think, remember in the days where the grandparents and the aunties and the uncles and the community, it takes a tribe to raise a child type of thing. Well, that doesn't happen so much now. And even the grandparents, so, the grandparents who are in their 50s and 60s, they're often still needing to work financially. So they're not even available for their grandchildren to help nurture and care for them these days, because everybody's needing to be out there earning a living, because it takes a lot to survive these days financially. And I think the things that are important to us today are different than they used to be in the days where, the mother's role, and I could get shot down for this now, but where the mother's role was to stay at home and nurture the child. And now a lot of women, want to be career women, or they need to be working financially to be able to pay the mortgage, to be able to pay the rent, to be able to survive and live. I don't know what it's like in the States, but just to rent a house here now costs, an average house, not even a fancy house, costs more than one person's wage each week. So it's almost impossible for a young couple with a baby or a couple of young kids to survive on one person's wage, generally speaking. So I get that both parents need to work, but I think that, that at least the first couple of years are super important. And I have this bit of analogy, that our children, come into this world like a blank neck-top computer. So they've had no programming, no, software put in or anything yet. And so it's the adults of influence around that child who determine what gets programmed in. So you want to be really careful, if you're not looking after the child yourself, what the people around your children at that very young and formative age are saying, doing, communicating, what vibes they're putting out, what words are they using. It's so important. Every word that we say to our child from birth impacts the person they're going to be later on. It's so vitally important. And there's even a train of thought that even in utero, that our kids are picking up on things that are said or done, or feelings, etc. So even as a mother, when we're pregnant, it's really important to stay calm, to not, be arguing or angry or so forth, because the baby can pick up on it. There's various trains of thought, but it's complex, isn't it? Especially in these days.
I wonder how much of that can be contributed to when you had the mother. I'm speaking to heterosexual relationships now. When you had the mother and the father separate, and you're able to supplement one of their incomes, you no longer needed them in the house. So, for example, if you could be a single parent, there is sources of secondary and tertiary income that could supplement the other person's income. So you no longer needed to be married to have children to maintain the household. So you can be a single parent. And as that began to rise, because in most cases the mother would have the child, right? So as that began to rise in certain communities, it was widespread. And now it went from something that wasn't necessarily talked about or shamed to a little bit, where now for some people it's a preferred method. They would say that if I'm going to have a child by terrain and he makes 45,000 and I make 45,000, I'd rather have the child making 45,000 and not be married to terrain, even though it would make more sense to have the child and make the 90,000. But what comes to that 90,000 is, as you mentioned, there's going to be certain roles, right? There's going to be certain compromise, because now we're a unit raising this child versus I could possibly get some source of income from terrain, child support, something from the government, and still raise this child. And because it's no longer the village raising the child, I think the daycare has replaced the village, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there are I actually work with, I have a lot of people in my course who are childcare providers and educators, and some of the ones in my current course have home daycare businesses. where they might just have, 3 or 4 or 5 children in there. And one lady in particular that comes to mind, she's got 2 of her own children, and she has about 4 or 5 children each day, but she's actually using the nurtured heart approach in her caring of these children. So they're very fortunate. I think that and I've been into a lot of early childhood facilities, childcare centres, and some of them seem very big and very cold, and kind of they don't have that warm family feeling, and then others do. So it really does depend as well. And I guess if you are a young parent and you have to be out working and you do have to put your child in care, maybe it's worth taking a little bit of time to look for some of those, maybe home day care type situations where you feel that the carer is like-minded. Although it is tricky, it's really, really difficult these days. And I know that, my youngest son and his partner, I know that I feel that she will want to go back to work sooner than 5 years, just because she loves her career and what she does. And I hope that and I'm pretty sure they will, want my husband and I to be a part of their, bringing up of their child, because I know they trust us and I know we have the same values. But not every family has that. Not every young couple has, parents who can step in. So yeah, it is very, very tricky. But I think, sometimes it is also about quality and not what's the word? Yeah, quality, not quantity. So, for example, if you can't be with your child 8 hours a day, the 2 hours or the 3 hours that you are with them, make sure that is quality time. And so that the child does feel, supported and cared for and loved. Our parenting coach, when my son was 14 to 16, when he was really, really challenging, he said something to us that has really stuck in my mind. And he said to me, "Do you know how gangs are formed?" And I'm like, well, I kind of know what a gang is, like whether it be a street gang or a political gang or what have you. And he said, when the child, and you might relate to this or not, but when the child doesn't feel connected and loved and seen and heard in the home, and we're probably talking more now about adolescence, or preteens or adolescents, when they don't feel seen or heard, mum doesn't get me, dad doesn't get me, they're always yelling at me, they don't let me do anything, I don't feel, like they know who I am, they will go out and seek their gang elsewhere. And they will probably even have that vulnerability about them where a gang leader or member of some description will bring them in because of their vulnerability, and these kids can end up in situations where they're doing things that might not even align with who they are as a person, just because they want to be a part of that gang as such or community. So there's that sort of thing as well. And, and I know that a lot of parents I speak to, their teens, they're not feeling connected to their teenagers. Their kids are either not talking to them, or they're arguing with them all the time, or they're spending 90% of their time in their rooms on their devices. They're barely coming out to have meals with the family. And the parents are like, I don't know what happened. When they were 10, 11, 12, everything was okay. And now all of a sudden they don't want anything to do with us. And so that relationship and connection needs to start earlier. It needs to start earlier, so that kid, like our kids now, even though they're in their 30s, they're constantly wanting to hang out with us. My daughter-in-law actually invited us to part of their honeymoon, and we're like, because they wanted to go overseas for their honeymoon, and a part of that, they wanted to go to Malta, which is where my dad came from. And they said, hey, let's meet in Malta together, which is a part of their honeymoon. So what kids invite their parents, to their honeymoons? So, we go on trips together, we can go camping together. My daughter-in-law took me to the theatre a couple of days ago, and we had dinner together and we went to the theatre together. We had lunch yesterday together, the two of us. So I have a great relationship with my daughter-in-law as well. And that's because we've worked on those relationships, if that makes sense. So she lived with us for 5 to 6 years, and we always made her feel comfortable. We always, made her feel like she was a part of our family. And, that's so important, because for me, as a mother of sons, I know that sometimes when the sons go off and get married, if the sons' partners don't like their partner's parents, the son's not going to get to see their parents much, because the wife will be like not really wanting that relationship. Whereas if you have a great relationship with your son's partners or potential wives, then they're going to want to hang out together. So yeah, we need to nurture those relationships early on, I believe, and as early as possible.
What do you believe is preventing parents from having that type of relationship when they've with their children when they've had it so young with them, but as they grew older in their adolescence, nearing adulthood, there seems to be something that happens that kind of severs that type of closeness between the two.
I think that, I don't know, I mean, I've only parented, well, I have parented for a long time, nearly 40 years, but I think that today's generation, we are different people. Like the young people growing up today with, they have access to so much information, with the internet and technology. But I think that it comes down to really the core things. And in the Nurtured Heart approach, we talk about upside down parenting. And I think a lot of parents make this mistake early on only because they don't know any different. I think at the core, every parent truly loves their child on a very deep level. But a lot of parents start focusing at a very young age on things going wrong, on rules being broken, on, things that the kids are doing that are not in alignment with what the parents want. And they give so much time and energy and focus on those things that they don't allow the time to be looking at what's going right, at the things the children are doing right, at the children being respectful, at the children being, kind and cooperative and compliant. And I think a lot of the kids grow up just thinking, I'm not good enough in this family. I'm always getting things wrong. So we have this thing that we call a portfolio of greatness, and we call it inner wealth. So it's building a sense of that child from that very young age right through until they leave our home, whether they're 18 or in their 20s or whenever, of how are we helping to develop that child's sense of self. And we're doing that through what we focus and give an energy and attention to. So we can either give energy and attention and focus to them breaking the rules, being disrespectful, not listening, not getting things done, being mean to their brother or sister, being rude or what have you. We can give all of that stuff the focus, or we can use our focus to look for the things the kids are doing right. And even a kid who has the potential innately to be that little bit more challenging, to be that little bit more intense. And some kids, I think, just come into this world that way, a little bit more intense. They really, do more to seek relationship than they do approval. Like, as an example, my two boys are very different. My eldest son, who was very compliant, cooperative, etc., he would do more for approval than relationship. Whereas my youngest son would do anything for relationship. And because we were doing so much upside down back when we didn't know any differently, he learned that he got that relationship from mucking up, from breaking the rules, from doing the wrong thing. And I think that becomes ingrained very young if we focus on that. And the kid feels like, for me to get that connection and that relationship from the person who means the most to me when they're young, mum and dad or other adults of influence, I've got to muck up. I've got to break the rules. I've got to, be silly in the classroom, for example. If they're wanting relationship from the teacher, I don't get that relationship unless I muck up. So I think as adults of influence, whether we be parents or educators or grandparents or, just adults of influence, we need to really focus more on looking at the qualities and the greatness that we see in our kids. And I think having them know that we see them and appreciate them is so, so important, instead of, I can't get this right. I muck it up all the time. I know mum and dad love me, but they only, focus on all the things I do wrong. They don't see me for the things I do right. And I think we just need to change the lens of the way we relationship with our kids.
That's a complaint for high achieving people, um, straight arrow people. They, in general, feel that there's too much attention given to those that are screwing up, for lack of a better word,
Oh
right?
my gosh, absolutely.
Whereas, and I think we talked about this the previous time when we spoke. I told you that I suffered that where I was achieving, but then I would
Yeah.
notice that other people would get
Mm-hmm.
attention, which is rightfully so. We all want attention and we all should get some form of attention. But
Yeah.
when you take away from people who are actually achieving, it sends a message to them that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I see what you're doing. I'm not really going to acknowledge it. Keep doing it, however, but this person's getting all your other attention. And I remember a
Correct.
case where there's someone I interviewed and he said that he fell victim to that now that I remember it. And he ended up attempting suicide
Well, I've got a personal
because of
story,
it.
Shireen. Yeah, absolutely. It might have
Yeah.
even, I don't know if that was my story that you remember. I don't know if I shared this with you. So this is why I'm so passionate about this as well. And you're absolutely right. And it happens in the classroom and it happens in the home. So the kids in the classroom, for example, and I'm a teacher, as you know, even when I think back to my teaching days, the kids who would get on with their work, get the job done, they didn't call out in class, they just got things done, they got very little relationship from me. I might have given them what we call junk food praise, good job, well done, whereas the kids who mucked up, who were constantly seeking attention, calling out, not getting their work done, they got so much more relationship from me. And then what I would notice sometimes, the difference at the start of the year, and then I'd go, how come those kids at the start of the year who were the good kids, the kids who listen and were cooperative, start mucking up? Because they start realizing, hey, if I want that connection and relationship from that adult of influence, teacher in this instance, I need to do what those other kids do, and I need to start doing some things that will get attention, mucking up, breaking the rules, calling out. And I didn't even get that when I was a teacher. It wasn't until I learned this work. But in relation to the story you just shared about the gentleman you interviewed, I have that. And in some ways, this breaks my heart, more than the challenges we had with our younger sons. So my eldest son is a straight arrow. Like, he's very intelligent, like at school, he straight A student, never got in trouble, always, and he was self-entertaining as a young child. He would play Lego for hours, he would read for hours, he was just self-entertaining. And we probably, allowed him to do that without giving him a lot of connection and relationship, even before his younger brother came along. So we were making mistakes from the get-go. But when his younger brother came along, and he was 7.5 years old when his younger brother came along, second relationship, second marriage, then his younger brother demanded so much attention from us because of his challenging behavior that my eldest son became more and more withdrawn, more and more depressed, more and more he developed an OCD. He would clean the house, which we thought was funny, and it was great. He would clean when he got depressed, like to a compulsion. And when he was a young teen, I believe at 13 years old, he actually got up in a tree. Now, we did not know this until he was in his 20s. He put a noose around a tree and attempted to hang himself. He was so depressed about the dysfunction in our family and the fact that his younger brother was getting all of the relationship, attention, connection, that he was just getting a few bits of junk food thrown at him. And it was almost like, we've had really good discussions, he felt like he was just expected to be the good kid. And at one point, he was our babysitter because we couldn't get a regular babysitter to come in and look after his little brother. So when he was, for example, 17, 18, and his younger brother was 10, 11, we couldn't get anybody in to look after him because he was so challenging, that our eldest son would stay home with him, and so we just expected all of these things from him as the good kid. And he has had to do a lot of work on himself as an adult, and fortunately, he has done that. But we still have a lot of really good discussions around that. And I think in some respects, even when I see him as an adult, and he's a beautiful adult, a very caring and loving adult, but I still see bits of him not feeling good enough in his adult life. And he's super intelligent, but he's always having to prove to others how, like, it's almost like he's seeking that connection and relationship now, even as an adult, through how smart he is and how much he gets done. He's got like several businesses. He's so busy, and he's so, like, everybody thinks he's amazing because he's so smart. But it's almost like he's still seeking that from his childhood, if that makes sense. So knowing what I now know, I actually look at both of my boys, and I can actually see all the mistakes I made, knowing what I now know, that I wish I'd known earlier. And I can see them have manifested in my sons. And had we not been on this journey and done a lot of this healing, they might not be fully functioning adults today. They might be, who knows where they might be in their lives. I truly believe if we didn't do the work that we did, that they wouldn't be the people they are today, and we certainly wouldn't have the relationships we have today. So it's never too late. If you're a parent listening in and you're like, oh my gosh, my child's already 15 and this is happening, it's never, ever too late. And I've even helped, adults heal their relationships. So adults in their 40s and 50s heal their relationships with their older parents, and vice versa, because sometimes we carry through a lot of that hurt from our childhood, and sometimes we just hold that inside, and when we hold that inside, that can then turn into disease, physical disease, emotional disease. So there is a sense of forgiveness, I think, too, for us adults if our parents didn't parent us in the proper way. But I think if you are a young parent and you understand this, prevention's better than cure, if that makes sense.
I wonder how much of that falls on the firstborn, because the firstborn usually comes around a time where the parents are still trying to figure it all out, and they mean well, and they're
Yeah.
trying their
Mm.
best. But it does seem in a lot of case studies and a lot of readings and reviews that the attention seems to shift, right? Let's say, for example,
Yeah.
you have three children. There's a thing called the middle child syndrome,
Yeah.
right? They're not
Mm.
necessarily the firstborn and they don't get the attention that the last one gets, especially if
Yeah.
it's a different sex. Let's say you had two
Yes.
boys and a girl. Well, it's the
Mm-hmm.
first girl. She's the youngest. She's a princess forever. Even though she's 50
Yeah.
years old, she's still
Mm-hmm.
going to be daddy's little princess. But
Correct.
when you have two boys, because I look at when myself and my brother were born, there's three of us, but when I look at myself and my brother, there was a disconnect there because there's a lot of things that he ended up getting that I didn't get, which I wish I got.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it took me some time that I wasn't necessarily upset at him. I was upset at the situation in my 20s because it
Yeah.
came across as being unfair,
Correct.
especially when he was going through some behavioral challenges and I still wasn't experiencing that. I'm like, hey, I'm Terrain. I'm still the good
Yeah.
boy. I'm still performing. Why am
Yeah.
I not getting this attention? So, what
Mm-hmm.
I ultimately did was I moved out at the age of 20, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, if I can't get what I want from my parents, let me at least go out there and get it in
Yeah.
another way. But thank God I got what I wanted in a positive way versus
Correct.
like many people who go the gangs and the things like
Correct.
that. And then when you're doing that, you're getting a
Mm-hmm.
negative attention because now you're committing things that you necessarily wouldn't do under your
Correct.
parents' roof. So
Mm-hmm.
do you see that happening as well where the child's like, okay, I've tried,
Mm-hmm.
now I just need to exit the situation to see what else is out there, and maybe an
Mm-hmm.
absence of myself will make them appreciate me more.
Absolutely. I see that all the time. And it's really sad. I mean, I think sometimes the good kid ends up with more challenges than the one who was challenging as a child, if that makes sense, because they're continuing to seek that validation, and that here I am, I'm the good kid, I'm the achiever, I'm the one who's doing well at school, I'm the one who's not mucking up, I'm the one who, but you're not seeing me. And I think that's, once again, why I'm going to just really promote what I do so much, because with the nurtured heart approach, what we teach parents is to give that acknowledgement and recognition and relationship as equally as you can. Now, Gabor Mate, who I spoke to you about before, said no child is ever parented the same. So if you're in a household where you've got more than one child, 2, 3, 4 children, none of those children are parented the same, because in each circumstance, things are happening differently. The relationship with the parents could be in a different place. Their financial situation could be different. There could be various different other stresses depending on, where you were born and when you were born and what was happening. So even though the parents are primarily the same parents, often they're not parented the same, depending on various situations. But I think that as a parent, if you understand the concept of building inner wealth in your children, and if you do that equally as you can, and I don't mean you've got to say, okay, today I'm going to give 20 minutes to every child, but just being consciously aware that all of our children really need the relationship from you equally. And it might not be, an hour each every day. You don't have to sort of document it, but to be seeing and recognizing your children and helping to build up their sense of self as positively as you can. Now, some kids are going to go off and be who they're going to be, regardless of what you do as a parent for various reasons. But I think if as a parent that you have given as much as you can to that relationship, and that you have seen your child for who they are. And our kids are different. Like my 2 sons were different. And had I known what I know now, oh my gosh, I would have done things so very differently. But and it's a cliche, but we all say we don't get a parenting manual when we have kids. We work it out as we go. And I had a call yesterday with one of my clients, and she said she's really suffering some generational trauma, from her upbringing, and she's seeing it manifest in her own parenting, and she wants to break that cycle. So unless we have an aha at some time where we go, oh my gosh, I'm actually being my mum or my dad, or I'm doing the things that I didn't like that my mum and dad did in my parenting, and I can't believe I'm doing that, or I just said what my mum or dad used to say and I hated it when I was a child, therefore how is it okay for me to do that now? I think there has to be that awareness as well. I mean, I would love to see a system where a couple who are having a child learns this sort of stuff early in their parenting, or even, once they get pregnant, they do some sort of course to teach them this sort of stuff, so that they're getting it from the get-go. They're getting, an understanding, because we don't get that manual. And we often either follow our instinct, or we read books, or we talk to other parents, or we follow what our parents did. And most of those are not getting it right either. So we're following, things that perhaps aren't positive. But I think, I don't know, I think that parenting is one of the most challenging and rewarding things we'll ever do, and I think we have a huge responsibility as parents to that child, because how we connect and communicate in relationship with them is going to determine, to a very large extent, the big person they're going to be, the adult they're going to be in the world. So it is a very, very important relationship that we have. I used to call it a role, but I don't think it's a role. It's a relationship. It's a really, really important relationship that we have. And it's ongoing. Like, my boys are in their 30s and, I'm still working on my parenting, and I'm still looking at, the things I say and do and how I can do it better. My husband and I are constantly having conversations about how we can do it better, even now when our boys are in their 30s.
I look at parents as the child's first superheroes,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
And
Like,
look, oh, absolutely. And it's so important for our children. And I don't know why I'm saying particularly boys, but I think it's particularly important for a boy to have a really strong male role model. Now, it may not be the father, it could be an uncle, it could be a grandparent, it could even be a sporting coach or a teacher or somebody, but it's super important for that male to have that. And when our youngest son was really revolting, I was his favorite toy. So that's another nurtured heart terminology. So I got all of the most of the abuse, the not so much physical, but the emotional abuse from him. And my husband, being the amazing supportive husband he is, was wanting to protect me from that, which in turn fractured their relationship, because my husband was wanting to defend me and nurture and protect me from my son, who was very abusive, like emotionally abusive. And so they had somewhat of a fractured relationship, even though they're so very alike in nature. Um, and so our parenting coach, when our son was 15, suggested something to my husband that was a huge game changer. He actually said, find something that you and your son can connect with and really, bond with. So at age 15, my husband and my son decided to build a car. And they started with a motor, and they bought an old Valiant motor, not the car yet, just the motor. And they rebuilt that motor in the garage from scratch. My husband's very handy with all that sort of stuff. They spent, I kid you not, hundreds of hours. They then took that motor, they bought an old Valiant, they took out the old motor, put the new one in, they rebuilt the car, they painted it. They spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours together on that. And then when my son got his license, he had a brand new remodeled Valiant that he and his dad had built from scratch. And even though I was a little bit jealous of that relationship because they spent so much time together, it bonded them. And my son and my daughter-in-law to be were discussing. So they've already booked the date for their wedding. And guess who my son wants to be? Guess who my son wants for his best man in his wedding party?
ooh,
His dad.
that's amazing.
He said, my dad is my best friend. I know he has other friends. He has good friends and he's going to have his brother in his wedding party and a couple of friends, but he wants his dad to be his best man because he's his best friend. And that could have gone very wrong terrain because they're kind of very alike. So they were clashing a lot when they were younger, when my son was younger. And when my husband learnt how to switch the way we were connecting and relationshiping, like I teach now through the nurtured heart approach, my husband was so good at it. I think a lot of men just need structure. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Tell me what I need to say or not say. And my husband was so coachable. He was actually better at it than me. So when our parenting coach said, do this, don't say that, don't do that, whatever, he did exactly everything he said. If our parenting coach told my husband he had to do 100 push-ups every morning to help his relationship, he would have done it. He was so coachable. And even to today, they've worked together. So my husband's an electrician and they worked in an electrical contracting business for 13 years together. They never had one argument. Neither was ever disrespectful to the other, because my husband showed so much respect to my son, even though he could have been challenging at times, especially back in the earlier days. My husband never dropped his affinity of unconditional love. And my son appreciated that so much that he was never disrespectful to his dad. And now, even, at age 30, has never been disrespectful to his dad in the last 15, 16 years. They have a beautiful relationship. They talk about, all sorts of stuff. They're really connected. But that's because my husband made that effort. And I truly believe if we didn't get that coaching back then and we were on the same trajectory that we were on prior, our son would have been out of our house. He told me when he was 14, I'm going to be out of here as soon as I can. And he lived at home until he was 30. So, like, if we hadn't changed the way we chose to connect in relationship with him at that young age, then we would definitely not have the connection and the relationship we have today. So it's not like our coach said, if you have a revolting child in your home, like a disrespectful, a disobedient, a challenging child, don't look at the child, just take a look in the mirror, because it's really about how we're responding to the child, and how we're making the child feel. So yeah, as I say, I could just talk about this forever. We could get onto all sorts of topics here. And we've been all over the place, haven't we?
No, that's fine because it's such a parenting and relationships, all the different forms are so interconnected because it starts with the home. I will
Yeah.
always say that everything always starts with the home. And when you mention that you had a challenging child, and I know you went into detail in our previous conversation and you made it work, there's some parents out there who are still struggling with that. They can't figure it out. And there's times where I talk to some parents and they will say that they're not the issue. The issue is, well, I gave birth to this demon child. He's the seed of the devil, all this other sayings. But what do you like the people that you deal with? What seems to be a commonality that is preventing them from saying, you know what? I play a part in this, and I need to understand, acknowledge, and resolve my part before I can ask anyone else to resolve theirs.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head there. And what I've done with my coaching over the years is I used to focus more on how can we help the parent have a better relationship with the child. But now it's how can we heal the parent and help them to see themselves in a better light. So build their inner wealth as well. So how can a broken parent their child in a positive and uplifting and positive way? We have to work almost simultaneously on healing the parent and their trauma from perhaps their own childhood before we can actually help them to parent their child in the way they want. And I've told this story thousands of times, and I may have shared this with you last time, but I think if you're a parent listening, this is really important. So I've written 6 books. And when I wrote my 3rd book, The Revolting Child, A Blessing in Disguise, which is my favorite book, it's our story from my pregnancy right through until our son turned just short of 16. So we talk about that healing journey from 14 to 16. You can download that for free off my website. But we did a book launch, and I'm pretty sure I would have shared this with you, but I'll say it again. We did a book launch, and my son was invited along. So he's now turned 16. There were about 250 or so people in the room. My husband and I shared our story and our journey, and my son was just sitting up the back. He wasn't participating. He was just there. And when we did the Q&A, a gentleman put his hand up and said, "Can I ask your son a question?" And he's up the back, and I kind of looked across at him and like, oh, okay. He wasn't really all that excited about it, but he stood up, and this gentleman asked a simple but profound question. And he said, "Caleb, we've just heard the story your parents have shared about your journey, and particularly what's transpired in the last 12 months from revolting child to a lot of healing." And he said, "What was it, Caleb, that took you from where you were getting in trouble at school, kicked out of school, in trouble with the police, oppositional, aggressive in the home, totally not in the place we wanted him to be, to where you are now. And I don't mean that we've healed 100%. I don't think we ever heal 100%, but we were like 80 or 90% better than we were, 10 months prior. And I actually thought, well, what a great question. I've never thought to ask that question before. So I was fully ready to listen to my son's response. And I could see his mind just tick over for a few seconds before he answered. And what he answered was so simple but so profound. He said, when I saw the effort that my mum and dad went to or were going to be the best parents they could be, I just wanted to be the best son. And so if you are a parent out there, and it still makes me feel emotional, if you are a parent out there and you're struggling, your kids are looking to see that you see them. They're looking to see that you're acknowledging them for who they are. And even if who they are is not who you want them to be as a parent, if the child, if it's not even who you want them to be in this moment, but just see them for who they are. See the greatness that you see in them, even if it's not perfection. Look for the opportunities to acknowledge their greatness, their qualities, their respectfulness, their kindness, their thoughtfulness, their savviness, their sense of humor. Like, see the child for who they are, because when we parents make the effort to show that child we see them, the child sees us seeing them. And so our son, who prior to that only saw his parents, yes, loving him, but not seeing him, always focusing on the things he was doing wrong, always focusing on the mistakes he was making, the trouble he was living in at school, the bad relationships he was having, we focused so much on that stuff. So when we switched it and started seeing him for the great person he always was, then it was like that. It's like a law of reciprocity, isn't it? Like, you smile at somebody, they smile back. So when you make the effort as a parent, even if you're not getting it right, even if you're not perfect yet, but if the child can see that you're making an effort to be a better parent, then they will just organically or just want to be a better person, want to be a better kid. So when I'm coaching my parents, if the children particularly are at that teen age year, like, 13, 15, 16, 17 years old, then I actually suggest that the parents have a candid and loving conversation with them. And because our parenting coach said one of the best things we can do is to apologize to our child. Often as parents, we're like, we're the parent. Why should we apologize? We're the authority, But when we actually sat down with our son and said, you know what, we love you. We've always done our best, but we've made a lot of mistakes as a parent, but we're wanting to do it better. And we're learning some strategies to be better versions of us so that we can be better parents. So not making it about the child, not making the child feel like they're the muck up, they're the reason, but letting the child know that we need to work on us, like we've made mistakes in our parenting and relationshiping, that we want to do it better. And will you work with us on this? We're not going to get it right. It's going to be a bit, feel a bit awkward. It's going to, but we want to, or I want to, as your mother, I want to be a better me. I want to be a better communicator, a better relationshipper, and I need to work on me so that I can do that for me. And then I want our relationship to be better. The kids will usually respect that. Now, sometimes I've found they might reject it because they don't believe that you believe that about them, because for so many years you've told them you're so disrespectful, you never listen, you don't follow the rules, you don't get your homework done, your room's always a mess. They're so used to hearing all that when we start acknowledging them for their greatness, for their qualities, sometimes they don't believe it and they'll reject it. And they'll even tell their parents, stop that. I don't like it when you speak to me like that, because in their mind, they don't believe they deserve it. And I encourage parents to go to just ride through that and continue with it, because our son gave us the insight for me to be able to say that to parents, because he actually said to me in his adult years, we've had so many beautiful conversations. He said, Mum, you know, when you used to try and say all that positive stuff to me and you'd tell me all this positive stuff and I rejected you, I'd roll my eyes or I'd say even something negative to you that I didn't like it. He said, but you know what, Mum, on the inside, I really did love it. I really did appreciate it, but I just didn't want you to know that. He was wanting, I guess he was, I don't know, maybe he was wanting to hurt me for hurting him, or he just didn't want to acknowledge it. So, but I just stuck with it and persevered with it to the point where you should hear the way he talks to me now. It's beautiful. Like, he acknowledges me. It's like he's done my nurtured heart training. He is so good at that language. He sent me a message the other day that was so beautiful. I'm like, it just brought tears to my eyes, acknowledging me for my strength and, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, wow, you know. So what we model is what we get back, right? If we model a certain way of connecting and communicating, and it doesn't matter whether it's as a parent or if you're a husband and wife, how many of us grown-up people speak badly to our partners or don't acknowledge what they're doing right? We focus on, oh, you forgot that again. You didn't do that. You do, like wives nag their husbands, like we do. Why don't we acknowledge it more? And I'm still working on that too. You know, like we focus on the stuff, especially, you know, us wives, we get together and we go, oh, the husband never remembers to do this and doesn't, you know, like we're always complaining about things they don't do. But how about acknowledging the things they do? And if you stop to think about it, if you really took audit of all the things we do and don't do in the day, we focus so much more on, it's like, imagine a big piece of paper with a little dot in the middle. We tend to focus in on that dot and we don't see all the white around the dot. And that happens in our relationships as well. We zone in on the things that we don't like, that aren't going well, instead of focusing on all the other amazing stuff that's happening. And that's in every single relationship, even in the workplace. I mean, how many, we could teach the nurtured heart approach in the workplace. How many bosses or, you know, or leaders in the workplace don't acknowledge their team? They just focus on the things they're doing wrong or not getting right or not doing well enough. Imagine if we nurtured them, how much more productive would they be in the workplace if we acknowledge them for the things they were doing, or even the steps towards making better choices or decisions.
I've always wondered that myself because it seems like there's a specific personality type that always finds themselves in those type of roles, whereas people that focus more on the negative than the positive, and maybe it's just that personality type because there's like 16 different personality types, right? So you have someone that just focuses on the negative and they can't see the positive in what people do. Like, you could save the world, right? But one person passes away and they only focus on, well, you know what? One person died, but I just
Yeah.
saved millions and millions of people. I've cured world hunger. There's no disease, but that one person. And I wonder if it's because it's easier to focus on what isn't going right versus what is going right. And it's always a simpler approach to tear down than it is to build up,
I
right?
think, sadly, it's inbred in many of us to be more negative and focus on the negative than the positive. And until we make a conscious decision to change that, and I mean, even if you look back in history, you know, like, it's been around a long time. It's not just a recent thing. So I think we need to, as humans, be more consciously looking for things that we can value and appreciate and acknowledge. And yes, there are a lot of negative things happening in the world. So, for example, we don't have a TV in our house. We have a screen. We can watch a movie if we want to, but we don't have free to air. We don't watch the news. We don't listen to the radio. We don't read newspapers, because 99% of it is negative. And I can't change anything by focusing on all the negative stuff that's happening, even a lot of sad stuff that's happening in the world. I can only change what's happening in my sphere of influence by being a kind person, by being a thoughtful person, by acknowledging the person in the shop who took the time to fold my clothes nicely, or by acknowledging good service in a restaurant by giving a nice tip because the person acknowledged, and gave great service, by focusing on things that I see that I can, I love acknowledging people and recognizing people. And people are not used to it. People get blown away when you acknowledge them for things. They're like, wow. I heard a lady serving somebody, and she was just lovely. She was helpful. She was really helping this woman. And when the woman went and it was my turn in the queue, before I even gave my things to be, packaged up, I actually acknowledged her for the way she treated that customer. And she almost had tears in her eyes, because she's like, wow, she said, oh, I always try and give good customer service and I try and help people out. But she said, nobody's ever acknowledged me for that before. I bet you the rest of those customers after me that day would have even got next level customer service from her, because she was seen and she was acknowledged for giving that good customer service. So now she's like, I'm going to notch that up even more. I bet you if I was a fly on the wall, she would have been notching that up more and more throughout that day. Because often, we'll focus on the customers, the bad customer service, or the bad experience that we had, rather than all of the good experiences. When you go home to your partner, are you going to tell them, oh, I met this really nice lady and she was really this, or you're going to focus on, oh, this guy cut me off in the car park, rah, rah, rah. Like, we focus on all the negative stuff. I think it's kind of almost innate in us, isn't it? So we have to really be consciously aware of looking for the beauty, looking for the greatness in the world, in people and in each other.
So as we close, Leanne, what some tips are you want to give to our audience to make sure that they're crafting the best relationship that they can have with their children to help them become successful in the way that they always wanted them to be?
I think, one thing when I first interview people not interview, but I have a consultation with people who potentially want to work with me, I ask them, what qualities do you want to grow in your children? Now, I have this watering can analogy. So imagine that you're constantly carrying a watering can around. What do you want to water in your relationship? What do you want to grow? So in your children, do you want to grow respectfulness, kindness, compassion, cooperation, or do you want to grow unruly behavior, disrespectfulness? Like they go, oh, no, we want to grow respect, all of those things. So that's what we need to water. That's what we need to give attention, connection, and relationship to, not the disrespect. We can't teach respect when they're being disrespectful. We teach respect when they're being respectful. We say, wow, that whatever they just did, that shows me that you're being so respectful in this moment. So focus on the things you want to grow and energize that, water that. Think about every word. So before you get your watering can out, go, what am I about to water? Am I about to water the weed, or am I about to water the plant or the flower that I want to grow? If you're about to water the weed, so if you're about to focus on a mistake they made, a rule they broke, we call it the reset. Reset, take a deep breath. What is it that I'm wanting to focus on? How can I acknowledge my child in this moment, for even a baby step towards that? So they might have been disrespectful a few minutes ago. They might have used bad language, inappropriate language, but now they're standing. They're still angry maybe, but they're standing and they're looking at me in the eyes. Even though they were disrespectful a few minutes ago, rather than focusing on that, I can say, I can see that you're still, feeling angry with me because I said you couldn't have such and so, but you're standing in front of me, you're looking into my eyes, and that really shows me that you're being so respectful in this moment. So rather than focusing on the fact that they were disrespectful, I'm wanting to grow the respectfulness. Even if they're still angry, even if they're still not behaving the way you'd like them to be, but they've calmed themselves down. You're showing great self-control in this moment. You really are being respectful in this moment. You're listening to me now. Find something to acknowledge. Find the thing you want to water and water that. and don't water the weeds that you don't want to grow. That would be my biggest tip. It's not always easy and it takes practice. But if you're consciously aware and almost have this kind of visual of the watering can, oh, what am I about to water? No, I don't want to water that. Switch, take a deep breath. Okay, what is it I'm wanting to water? Focus on that and look for an opportunity to water what you want to grow.